2 weeks ago, we talked about hell. Last week, we talked about love, all about Jesus and the stories that he has taught. And so this morning, let's have a word about butts. Okay? I know you're starting to think, but you know what? We all have them. They're usually pretty big, though some may be bigger than most, but we do have them, don't we? And some are so big that others try to hide behind them. Some of us use them more than others. However, they always end up getting in our way. And you're probably going, Mark, what in the world? You've gone off your rocker. You've lost it. You sure have some explaining to do, Lucy, with that. So, okay, let me try to go ahead here, if you would. How about, but I can't. But I'm over 40. I'm going to turn 60. But I don't have an education. But I don't have any money. But I'm in the wrong job. I'm in bad health. And I've been through so much. But I don't have anything to offer the church. But. Now, you will notice my little thing up there. I can cross out the extra T. We're going to talk about buts. Ifs, ands, or buts. Isn't that kind of nice? And you notice that they all start with, but I. God had a big butt too. But it all started with, but God. But God. The little phrase shows up, believe it or not, depends on what version you're reading, 66 times in the Bible. But God. Whereas our buts are excuses, God's buts are his response to Satan's challenge. You see, the world says no, but God says yes. The world says can't, but God says can. The world says won't, but God says will. The world says stop, but God says go. The world says don't, but God says do. The world says defeat, and God says victory. You see the difference? Our but is an excuse not to do something. And I heard a quote the other day that puts it a little in their perspective. The origin of every excuse is the failure to do something. Okay? Deion Sanders has been making it into the press these days. Baseball player and football player, and now 3-0 at his go at college coaching. But he is the only athlete to have hit a major league home run and scored an NFL touchdown in the same week. But you didn't know that, did you? Sanders grew up on the mean streets, if you will, of Fort Myers, Florida, where exposure to some would-be athletes spurred him to make a success of himself. He explains, I call them idas. If I'd done this, if I'd been I'd be making $3 million today. If I'd practiced a little harder, I'd be a superstar. He says they were as fast as me when they were kids, but instead of working for their dreams, they chose drugs and a life on the street corners. He says, when I was young, I had practice. My friends who didn't went straight to the streets, and they never left. That meant after school is the moment that we need to grab. We don't need any more idols. We need to get off our butts, he says. And we're going to take a look at that as we take a look at the parable of the Great Supper that we read earlier. But let's do just a little bit of background before this. When you read this, the story that Jesus tells, it's important to realize that it was custom for the host, to send out two invitations. One to announce the event, and the other to tell the invited guests that it was all ready. So it's kind of like a save the date, you get for weddings and anniversaries and all those sort of things. And then the second one when the actual party was. They didn't have the internet back then. In case you didn't know. All right? They can do it. And in this parable, the certain man that Jesus is referring to is God. God is preparing a huge festival, a feast, if you will, and has sent out the invitations to us. Excuse me. And once God is ready, he's going to send out the final invitation. So, the first invitation has gone out. The second is yet to come with that. But the problem with that is, in the story, if you will, you know, they were invited, but what did they all have? See, we're all invited. We're waiting for that final invitation. We have to determine what our response is going to be. But in the story that Jesus told, we have a lot of excuses. These excuses that these made were here are somewhat similar to the same excuses that we use today. The first one says, I bought a field and I need to go check it out. You know, like, you didn't see it before he bought it? I don't know. You think through this with that. You know, God is offering what we are desperately seeking, though, and we confuse our priorities at times. We put the priority of business or work over the priority of God. And I'm going to say this at a risk. Sometimes we put the priority of family. And now that sounds odd. But sometimes it's about the priority of God. And all those things fit into place. Second one said, I have just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. So please excuse me. Okay? Now, not many of you have probably ever used that excuse. I bought me some oxen. That's probably not how it works. Okay? Our priorities, though, are all upside down. We get enthusiastic over new experiences and things, and we tend to skip the celebration of Christ. You know? But you get something new. You get a new car. What do? Hey, come see my new car. Look at this. You know? I'm still finding things out about my wife's car. You know? I said, you can do that? She said, yeah. I said, whoa, wow. We get excited about those things. But God has sent us an invitation. And he's waiting for us to respond. And now the last one, you know, of all the excuses, maybe it's because I'm a man, I don't know, but of all the excuses, this seems to be the more legit of the other two, right? I just got married, so I can't come. All righty? The problem is that he's putting a human relationship over his heavenly one. And how many times do we tend to do that? And Satan allows us to justify those things, say, family's important, because none of us would disagree with that, would we? No. But you know what? If God's not in it, then that family is not going to be blessed and not going to be what it needs to be as well. God needs to be the priority, and that's what he's saying. I'm inviting you to this great banquet, this great resurrection in the sky, if you will. You see, and so I want to make this just a little bit personal. When it comes to, remember, he's in a Pharisee's house, and he's healed a man on the Sabbath, and anyway, and so he's made them uptight and all this sort of thing, and now they just keep going on, and that's why he tells the story with that. You know, so the Jews here in the story are beginning to understand they're in for a rude awakening. They're not going to be the only ones in heaven. All right? And then also for a more personal aspect, you know, think about the excuses that we make for not doing something for God or not going to church. We'll just focus on going to church here. Most people who don't go to church come up with some really good reasons, don't they? You ever talk to them, ever ask them, well, if I can, you know, my favorite one is, you know, if I can make it, if I can get all the manure all shoveled out, then I'll probably be to church, Pastor. Yeah, there was some manure going on. You know, one person even took the top 10 reasons and to show the weakness of those excuses, made a list of them, and instead of giving 10 reasons why we don't go to church, inserted the word wash. thought this was pretty ingenious, actually. Instead of the phrase, go to church, okay? So now in your notes that you've got from there, you're going to see 10 reasons why I never wash. Okay? So, number 1, I was forced to wash as a child. People who wash, though, are hypocrites. They think they're cleaner than others. There are so many kinds of soap, I could never decide which one's right. Or, I used to wash, but it got boring. Can't just keep with it, you know, that sort of thing. And or how about this one? I wash only on Christmas or Easter. Right? Hey, works for us, doesn't it? Or none of my friends wash. Or how about I'll start washing when I'm older. Or I just really don't have time to wash. And then number 10, people who make soap are only after your money. Hope I'm behind, aren't I? They're just after your money, those soap makers. And I'll tell you, you know, when you begin to put that in that frame, it kind of sounds kind of interesting when people, if you ask them in church, they give you a reason with that, doesn't it? Another reason that we don't attend church is that we always think, what? I'm just busy. Or at least we want to think that we are, right? We make ourselves busy. We're busy with our families. We're busy with our friends. We're busy with our work. We're busy with sports. We're busy volunteering. We're busy cleaning. We're busy cooking. We're busy with vacation. We're busy sleeping. We are just, I'm busy being busy. All right? We're just busy, aren't we? We're just too busy, listen to this, to be bothered by God. We don't often think of that way, do we? Sorry, God, I'm just so busy. I just don't have time right now. We're too busy to be faithful to His church. We're too busy to bother with ministry in church, that are Christ's ministry that He brings to us every day. But think about this for just a second. What if God got too busy? And what if He woke up one day and He says, you know, I'm just tired of it all and I want to do something else. And He just left us on our own. What if you found yourself in a desperate situation and needed the Lord's comfort to rest upon? And what if He was too busy to hear you? You see, we can't do God on our own terms and expect to come out on top. It's just not how it works. It's not how it works at all. So when we close out our sermon, I'm just going to do 3 notables today. 3 notables today. Everybody's getting excited going, hey, he might end on time today. Fat chance. Anyway, what is on time, you know? First notable is, why go to church? You know, why do we bother to even come? You know, can we find better things to do with our time after all? Church Grover wrote a letter to the editor of a newspaper years ago and complained that it made no sense to go to church every Sunday. I bet we could probably come up with that reasoning too. He says, I've gone for 30 years now, and that in the time I have heard something like 3,000 sermons, but for the life of me, I can't remember a single one of them. Heavens, I preach them and I can't always remember them. Heavens, did I preach on that topic before? So he says, he writes, I think I'm wasting my time, and the pastors